underdogs. They're the unlikely heroes, counted out, given no chance to win. But the playbook flips when God's involved. That's how shepherds take down giants. You see, when God steps in, the odds change. The weak become strong, the meek become mighty, and the lowly become legends.
Well, good morning, NorthPoint. Good to see you today. Hey, I am really excited about this season that we're about to enter into as a church. Sue talked about the Cultivate initiative that's going to be coming up here, and I really want to encourage you to be here next Sunday. After the service and second service, go outside, get some barbecue, come back into our commons, our big area there in the middle, and we're going to share more about the vision with you about how God is leading us and directing us to turn our building into a community center that's used 7 days a week to create spaces for grace and truth in our community to address some of the space needs that we have as a church, kind of the pinch that we've begun to feel on Sunday mornings with space and on Wednesday nights with space. We're going to try to address that, but especially create spaces for the grace and truth of Jesus to flourish throughout our community. This will be the first time that we'll be sharing visuals. So there'll be like a 3D rendering walkthrough of pictures of what things might look like. And so we're excited to share all of that and lots more with you next Sunday. You'll get your food, you'll eat your food, and it'll be about an hour. It'll be like 45 minutes to an hour. I think, I promise. John, we're promising that, okay? An hour, and we'll get you out after that. But come for that. And then on August the 11th, the week after that, we'll start actually a 5-week series talking about how God has led us to this, what he's calling us to do. Look at his word and see how his word challenges and directs us with what we're talking about doing, and talking about how you can participate and engage fully in what God is calling us into. So we look forward to sharing all of that with you coming up real soon. And now, we do have 2 weeks left in our Underdog series. So let's turn our attention there this morning. You know, some people are really known for their sayings or the slogans that they come up with. So all the way back to René Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Or we have nothing to fear but fear itself from FDR. Or you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky and also Michael Scott apparently said that. Or there's other sayings like many hands make light work, and you don't judge a book by its cover, and it's better late than never. In addition to this, there's some brand slogans where companies try to get a kind of a catchy tune to tell you what their product will do for you and what it's all about. So we'll make this interactive today. I'll give you the brand logo or the saying, and then you tell me what the brand is, okay? And I'll start off with the easiest one in all of history. Just do it. Finger licking good. I'm loving it. McDonald's, okay. How about I had one more. Oh, think differently. Apple, yes. Not as many people know that, but that is Apple's logo. How about this one, grace and truth? No, that's Jesus. Come on, that's Jesus's. No, hopefully it's NorthPoint's as well. But each of these sayings, they capture a truth. They capture an ideal. They capture something that people or even a company is striving to be, to live into, to live up to provide for us, right? My mom, who I've shared her journey with you, she passed away just over a year ago. And my mom was really known for giving generously to people. In fact, one of the things she loved to do was shop, and she shopped a lot, but she didn't really shop a ton for herself. She shopped for other people. She had 19 grandkids. She knew the sizes, the clothes sizes of all of these grandkids, and I think until our girls were teenager, my mom outfitted them. I don't know if we bought any item of clothing until they were teenagers, because she basically bought all of the clothes for them. Christmas was a huge time. There would be tons of gifts, but you would have boxes and boxes of clothes that my mom would buy for you that were specifically what you wanted. Sometimes maybe some things you didn't want as much, but you got lots of things there as well. In fact, my sisters, my mom would do this for everybody in our family and many people that weren't in our family. My sisters every once in a while would text my mom and say something like, "What's my husband's shirt size?" because my mom knew the sizes of everybody in the family better than even their own spouses did. She had a missionary friend that worked in the New York area and helped with low-income people and I think immigrants and refugees, and my mom would buy and ship boxes of clothes to her to help outfit people that were in need in that way. My mom was a very generous and giving person to everybody that she came in contact with. She would know exactly what you like, exactly what you wanted, and if she could find it at a discount, all the better. She would buy it for you and get it for you. Every birthday, we would get a birthday card from my mom. She was big on writing thank you notes and cards. You get a birthday card and a $40 check to buy whatever you wanted to buy. My mom coached volleyball as well for 25 years, and she loved all of her players, but she seemed to have a special affinity towards girls on her team that were from a difficult home life or a difficult background or just a hard life situation, and she would welcome them into our home. It wouldn't be uncommon for them to still come over years after she retired and visit her as she invested into their lives. So especially during the last couple years of her life when she was battling cancer, her charge to our family, and we had one special meeting where the whole family was together and sat around her living room when she didn't have many weeks left to live, and her charge to us was this: love big, serve big, and give big. Love big, serve big, and give big. Now, it wasn't that my mom came up with a slogan and they were like, okay, now this is how I'm gonna live my life. That's the way she lived her life, and towards the end of her life, that just sort of emerged as the theme of her life. So she would sign cards that way, and she would give the challenge to her whole family: make your life about loving others, serving others, and giving to others. That was her mantra. That was her mentality. Well, there is an underdog ideal, a mantra, a mentality that I think we see from the life of David that shows us what he is all about, that gives us an ideal to live into. And I want to put this very simple saying today on your radar as worthy of your pursuit. Because I think what we see in the life of David captures the heart of his life, especially his early life, and also captures the heart of, I think, what it means to be a mature follower of Jesus. If I'm growing in my relationship with Jesus, if I'm maturing, and if I look at my life and say, am I really maturing and growing in him? I think this thing we see in the life of David is what you will see in your own life. And it's simply this: it's humble confidence. Humble confidence. Not even really a saying. It's just two words, but these two words are exactly what you need in your life. Humility about yourself, humility about who you are, humility about your successes, humility about what you have going on and what you bring to the table, and at the same time, an incredible confidence and courage and boldness about God, about his goodness, about his greatness, about his plans, about his even gifts and grace to you. Humility about self, extreme confidence in God. Now, putting those two words together, humble and confident, might seem like an oxymoron, right? They might seem like they don't really go together. You know what an oxymoron is? An oxymoron is icy hot, which some of you are like, yes, as I get older, I live by icy hot. You know, it's really great. Other oxymorons, jumbo shrimp. I love shrimp. Don't you love shrimp? I do. And jumbo shrimp. That doesn't really go together, the two words, but jumbo shrimp are maybe the best. Those are great. How about old news? Have you ever thought about that? We use that phrase, old news, but it's really an oxymoron. Those two words don't really go together. The living dead, right? Whole genre of movies and shows based off of the living dead. Fun roundabouts. Although fun roundabout can go together. You know how fun roundabout can go together? Last Tuesday night, my family and I were coming home from a movie. It was one of my daughter's birthday, and so we celebrated by watching a movie together. And we come home, and we're going around the roundabout to go in towards our subdivision. And I do this to them every once in a while, only if nobody else is around. I'm like, we're going around this sucker again. And we just keep circling the roundabout. I just make sure that they're awake, just trying to cause a tornado from the roundabout and making people nauseous. And so we do it. So you can have some fun with the roundabouts. Again, don't do it if somebody else is around, but humble confidence might seem like an oxymoron, but it's exactly what we see from the life of David. And I think it's what spiritual maturity looks like. I'm going to show you that in David's life, and then we'll try to apply it to our own. We really see it throughout David's life, but it happens especially in his years before he became king. I think if a biographer was writing a biography of David's life, they might label the early years the humbly confident king in waiting. And you see this first in 1 Samuel chapter 17. So if you got a Bible, go ahead and turn there. It's on page 227. Now, this is the classic David and Goliath story. You know this story, even if you're not a Christian, you probably know what this story is. But there's the Philistine army against the Israelite army. The Philistines have a champion, a warrior, a seasoned, brutal, massive warrior who comes out and challenges any Israelite soldier to take him on. And the concept is probably that whoever wins this one-on-one battle actually wins the entire battle, and the other army has to kind of surrender, and they have to accept defeat in the battle. So that's the idea. Goliath is huge and massive. He comes out taunting the armies of God, the Israelite armies. He's mocking God, and nobody wants to stand up to him. Everybody is fearful of him. They're scared of him. David is a shepherd boy who's not even old enough to be in the army. But his father sends him to take some food to his two older brothers and to check in on their status who are in the army. When David gets there and he sees Goliath come out taunting and mocking God and the Israelite army, he's aghast at what is happening. And he's like, why is nobody standing up to this guy? How can we just let this guy continue to do this? Somebody's got to stand against him. And so he ends up saying this in 1 Samuel 17, verse 26. David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Who is this guy defying God and his people? Why are we letting this happen and take place? And by the way, what did the king say he was going to do for the man who takes this giant out and kills him? Well, he keeps asking this question, and his brothers catch wind of it. So you could imagine younger brother here, older brother's catching wind of younger brother being like, hey, maybe I want to take this on. What's going to happen? They get jealous of what David is saying. And like, David, quiet down. Go back home. Why are you even here? They're jealous of him, right? David just turns away from his brothers and he keeps asking groups of soldiers, hey, what's going to happen? What's going on here? What's the plan for this? Well, eventually that news gets to the king's ears and David finds himself with an audience before King Saul. Look at verse 32. David, before King Saul, says, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and will fight him. That's some chutzpah right there. You know the word chutzpah? It's a Yiddish word. It means audacity. It means gall. It means nerve or boldness. And David says, I'll take him on. And the king is like, you're a boy. You're a boy. You're not even in the army. You can't possibly do this. And so David has to talk King Saul into it by sharing some stories with him, which he does. He convinces the king. And so the king lets him go fight the giant Goliath. Now, I can't imagine that the king had very much confidence that David was going to win. He's probably preparing for defeat, but nobody else will go out and fight the giant. So he's like, okay, I guess we'll send this guy out. And so David goes out and he meets Goliath on the battlefield. This hulking, grisly, armored warrior, complete with sword and spear, looking down upon a boy with a slingshot. David doesn't have much with him, but he does have boldness. And he does have something else. Verse 45. David, as he meets the Philistine, says, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you've defied. This day, the Lord will deliver you into my hands. And by the way, I'm going to strike you down and cut off your head. This very day, I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the wild animals, and the whole world will know. The whole world will know there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know it's not by sword, it's not by spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. The chutzpah doesn't stop, does it? David just keeps bringing it, and he defiantly approaches this giant. He is unbelievably confident. But the question is, confident in what? Like, what is the source of David's boldness? Did you notice very clearly how he says this? He says, you're defying the army of God. You come at me with a sword, but I come at you in the name of the Lord Almighty. The Lord will deliver you into my hands, and the whole world will know that God doesn't save with weapons of war. He saves by his own might and by his own power. And everyone will know this. David's confidence comes from God. Sure, he's had some success in the past. God has taken care of him before this, but this is a new stage. This is a bigger threat. Yes, David has some ambition. We see that in the question he keeps asking about what is the king going to give to this person. But ultimately, his focus is on the glory of God. It's on the reputation of God. It's on God's power to be able to save him, even in this very tumultuous situation. And so David is honest about what he brings to the table. He brings to the table, he's like, I have some skills. I don't have sword skills, but I got a slingshot skill, and that has proven to be good in the past. I've seen some success from God in the past, and God has always protected me, and I believe that God will do it again, just like he's always taken care of me. David is not arrogant at all. You might read that and think, it's kind of arrogant. He's not arrogant at all. He is absolutely confident in the power of God to save him and in what God has given him to get the job done. See, humility is not, I'm worthless, I'm nothing, I don't bring anything to the table, I'm a loser, woe is me. That's not humility at all. That is false humility. True humility is honesty about yourself and then getting your eyes off of yourself and onto God. That's David's mentality. And so with his eyes fixed on God, he slings a stone at the giant Goliath, which stuns him, knocks him to the ground, and he does exactly what he said. He runs up to the giant, takes out his sword, and cuts his head off and holds it up before the people. God saves. God is victorious. Incredible, humble confidence by David. We see this from David again in 1 Samuel chapter 26. That's the second story I want us to look at. Turn over a few pages to page 236 in your Bibles. Last week we saw a similar instance to what we're going to see here in 1 Samuel 24, where King Saul now is after David. He's jealous of him. He wants to kill David because he thinks David is going to try to take the throne from him. And he chases David down. He ends up in the cave relieving himself. Remember this last week? David's in there, has a chance to kill King Saul. His men are like, kill him, take the kingdom, you can do it. And David is like, the Lord forbid. I got to wait for God and his timing. I'm not going to take his life. Well, a similar thing happens in 1 Samuel chapter 26. And this time, Saul pursues David now with 3,000 special forces troops. David, though, scouts him out. He knows where the camp of David is at, and he decides that he's going to pay Saul a visit at night while he sleeps. It's just David and a soldier named Abishai. They sneak into the camp when everybody's asleep at night. David has a chance again to kill King Saul because apparently he's stealthy like a fox. And this is the conversation that he has between him and Abishai. Look at verse number 8 of 1 Samuel chapter 26. We read this. Abishai says to David, "Today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't strike him twice." But David said to Abishai, "Don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives," he said, "the Lord himself will strike him. Or his time will come and he'll die, or he'll go into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now get the spear and the water jug that are at his head, and let's go." Now look, David is no wimpy, I'm afraid to get my hands dirty, I'm afraid to get my hands bloody kind of a guy. He is a seasoned warrior. At this point, he has killed hundreds of Philistines. He has killed hundreds of enemies, right? He's seen a lot of battle. He's strong, he's brave, and he is bold. And yet at the same time, he is humble enough to say, no, the Lord's going to take care of this. The Lord will deal with this. And he has spoken to me and he has told me I'm not supposed to take Saul's life. Some way God spoke that to him. And so, I'm not supposed to take matters into my own hands. This isn't my time. God's going to deal with that. This is about him. So grab that spear and that water jug real quick and let's get out of here, right? Before we get caught. David, after him and Abishai leave, they get some distance from the camp, and he yells back. He yells back, first of all, to Abner, who's the head of Saul's army and supposed to protect Saul. And he basically, he kind of taunts Abner a little bit. Hey, why did you not protect your king? He could have been run through with a sword. Some captain of his guard, you really are, Abner. Saul overhears this, and he's like, is that the voice of my son David? And David says again to Saul, Saul, I could have killed you. Why are you chasing me down? Why won't you trust me? I'm not trying to take the kingdom from you. This is all in God's hand, and God will do what is righteous. And once again, Saul, I don't know if it was true or not, but Saul repents. He realizes that David will be victorious in the end. He goes away from chasing him down on this occasion. And once again, from this story, like we've seen all throughout David's life, can you see his humble confidence coming through? He's incredibly courageous. To enter into an enemy camp with 3,000 elite soldiers, for sure there would be watchmen. For sure, there would be light sleepers among the bunch, right? I mean, you're not people that are training for battle the next day and you're sleeping soundly at night, snoring, going throughout the camp. Doubtful that would be happening, right? There's got to be some watchmen, some light sleepers. How many of you are light sleepers out there? I'll wake you up here. Light sleepers. We got some light sleepers like you hear a creak in the house, the wood shifts a little bit, your ice maker goes off and those ice cubes rattle into the thing and you're like, who is in my house? Like you have a hard time sleeping. How many of you are heavy sleepers? Like you've had the experience where every once in a while you've woken up in the morning and some member of your family says, did you hear the EF5 tornado that just came through the neighborhood? And you're like, no, I didn't even know. Was it raining? I don't know. Was there wind? I don't know. Like if somebody breaks into your house, you're a goner for sure. Like there's no way you're gonna, some of you are like that, right? Can you imagine sneaking into a war camp? Like actually think about that for a minute. Could you imagine sneaking into a war camp? I have to sneak around in my house sometimes. I get up early, especially really early on Sunday morning before everybody else is up, and we've got a dog that I feel like she can never hear except for when somebody is up early in the morning, right? And so she's just like waiting. And so I am literally like, I'll set the coffee maker and get it ready so I can just push a button and I'm like tiptoeing in my house as quiet as possible, trying to sneak around. And I'm usually not super successful. She usually ends up waking up, but I don't want her to wake up. Well, can you imagine sneaking into an enemy camp and having the courage and the boldness to be able to do that? That's what David does. It doesn't get more bold and brave than that. That is incredible confidence that David has, combined with the humility to trust in God's plan and not take matters into David's own hands, to make it about God, so that the boldness David has is used for God and his purposes. David doesn't think, well, I am gifted. Well, I have been successful. Well, God did promise me the kingdom, so I can do what I want to do. I am entitled. I can do what I want. It's about God and his purposes. And so David is willing to wait longer to be the king. He's willing to push back against his friends telling him, just David, do this. He's willing to sacrifice his own comfort. It's only going to be later in David's life when he chooses not to sacrifice his comfort, when he chooses to live as an entitled king, when he takes matters into his own hand and he thinks, well, everything in this kingdom I own, I deserve, I have this. And he commits adultery with a woman and he commits murder in order to cover up his adultery. When David becomes self-focused and self-confident, he fails. But when he remains humble about himself and extremely confident in God and his purposes, he sees victory. I think we see David's heart expressed so beautifully in one of his Psalms, many of his Psalms actually, but in Psalm 18. If you got a Bible, take it and turn to Psalm 18. It's on page 438. I've shared with you how in 1st and 2nd Samuel, we have the stories of David's life. We have the narrative description of what happened and took place. But in the Psalms, we get David's journal entries. And so if you combine reading 1st and 2nd Samuel with the Psalms that David wrote, you get an insight into his mind and his heart, what he is thinking and what he is feeling and how he is processing all of this that is going on. Well, Psalm 18 is a psalm that David wrote. You can see by the inscription, the introduction to Psalm 18, about when God gave him rest from all his enemies and from Saul. So David finally does become the king eventually. And as he looks back at what was going on in his heart and his mind during all of this time that he was waiting, we get an insight into what he's thinking and what he's feeling. And I want you to notice where David's strength and hope lies. Psalm 18, verse 1. He says, I love you, Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock. The Lord is my fortress. God, you are my deliverer. You are my rock in whom I take refuge. You're my shield. You are the horn of my salvation. You are my stronghold. I called to the Lord who is worthy to be praised, and I have been saved from my enemies. But there was a time when the cords of death entangled me, where the torrents of destruction overwhelmed me. The cords of the grave coiled around me. The snares of death confronted me. And so in my distress, I called to the Lord. I cried to God for help. And from his temple, he heard my voice. David is honest. He's honest about himself. He's honest about his feeling. He's honest about his wrestling. And in the midst of this, he's looking to God and say, I love you because you're my rock and you're my strength. And this is about you, God. And this is about your plans. And this is about what you can do. He goes on after verse number 6 to paint for us one of the more beautiful pictures in Scripture of the power and the strength and the glory of God in an artistic form. And so see if you can get this imagery as David talks about how God responds to his cries for help and how strong and big God is. Verse 7, so the earth trembled and quaked, and the foundations of the mountains shook. They trembled because God was angry. Smoke rose from his nostrils. Consuming fire came from his mouth. Burning coals blazed out of it. He parted the heavens and came down. Dark clouds were under his feet. He mounted the cherubim and flew. He soared on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him, the dark rain clouds of the sky. Out of the brightness of his presence, clouds advanced with hailstones, bolts of lightning. The Lord thundered from heaven. The voice of the Most High resounded. He shot his arrows and scattered the enemy. With great bolts of lightning, he routed them. The valleys of the sea were exposed. The foundations of the earth laid bare. At your rebuke, Lord, at the blast of breath from your nostrils. And he keeps going with this incredible picture of God like a dragon from the sky and all of his strength and power coming down to rescue him. You can see where David's focus lies and what is in his heart. His confidence here is in God, God's power, God's greatness, God's glory, God's work. But there's also another element that we get from David, an incredible honesty about his pursuit and what he is bringing to this relationship, what David brings to the table. Look at verse 20. The Lord has dealt with me according to my righteousness. According to the cleanness of my hands, he's rewarded me because I've kept the ways of the Lord. I'm not guilty of turning from my God. And he goes on to say this for a number of more verses. Now, that might sound a little audacious for David to be like, I'm righteous, I'm doing what's right, I'm following God, and he's blessed me because I'm walking with him. But this is not false humility. He's being honest. He's being truthful about the pursuit and the focus of his life. And what David is saying, God, I want to follow you. I've sought to walk with you. We know from other Psalms that David shared, he doesn't think that he's perfect and that he never sins. There's other Psalms where David asks for forgiveness and acquit me of my hidden faults and keep me back from presumptuous sins. He'll say things like that. So he doesn't think he's perfect, but he is saying, God, I am walking with you. I am following you. We are in step with one another. And so you show up and I am so confident in your plans and in your work. So let's go. Let's do this. You have blessed me. He goes on in verse 27 to say this, you save the humble, but bring low those whose eyes are haughty. You, Lord, keep my lamp burning. My God turns my darkness into light. With your help, I can advance against a troop. With my God, I can scale a wall. You know, for David, him being able to fight in battle and having the strength to do that was incredibly significant. So he says, God, you give me the strength to be able to do what I need to do in battle because I'm looking to you. His confidence is in God. Verse 30, as for God, his way is perfect, and your word is flawless, and you shield everyone who takes refuge in you. Now there's lots of verses there, so you could read more of that psalm. But what you get from David is this sense of humble about myself, my role, my position, what I bring to the table, honesty about it, and yet at the same time, incredible confidence in you, God, your plans, and what you are doing. Can we take this humble confidence of David that we see throughout his life and just give ourselves a couple of principles to work through here for our own lives? What is humble confidence? Well, first of all, humble confidence, when we talk about the humility side of it, humility is not about degrading yourself, but being honest about yourself. Humility is not degrading yourself, being down in yourself. It's about being honest about yourself. David is willing to watch sheep. When he comes before Saul, he calls himself a servant. He doesn't take things into his hand. He's completely reliant upon God. He doesn't act entitled or out for his own self-interest, but he knows what God has called him to. He knows what God has given him. He knows that he is obeying and following God, and he's committed to walking with God. He even reminds God of that in this psalm. I have walked with you. I have kept your ways. I am following you with my life. Again, seems a little bit audacious to us to maybe say that. It's not. It's just honest. David's not degrading himself. He's not down on himself. He doesn't have a phony humility, but he realizes that God is king. I'm his servant. He uses people. He's called me to this. So, God, what are we doing today? I think that's his perspective. God, what are we doing today? What do you have for me today? How can I be a part of what you're doing today? Let's partner together in this. So can I ask you, what abilities has God given you? What resources has he given you? What knowledge and insight has he given you? And what contribution do you have to make for his kingdom? It's not arrogant for you to think about that. It's not arrogant for you to talk about it. It's not arrogant for you to acknowledge it. And it's especially not arrogant for you to get excited about what God has given you to put to use in his kingdom and in relationships with other people. That's actually what he calls us to do. Like, for instance, some of you are really smart. I know that. I interacted with a number of you. You are really smart. Like, did you know this? We have somebody in our church, I'm not going to tell you who it is, but we have somebody in our church that is a laureate. In their company, at their job, they're a laureate. Have you heard of the Nobel Peace Prize? Those people are called Nobel laureates, right? This is like top of the ladder, like kind of expertise, creativity, and ingenuity in a specific field. A laureate, that is a very, very smart person. In fact, a number of times when I talk to them, I'm like, I think you're about 7 steps ahead of what I'm thinking about right now with what you're thinking about and what you're designing in your head, right? My title is lead pastor. That seems lame. Like, could I be lead laureate like around here? No, I'm kidding. But there are some really smart people. Now look, for all of you people that are smart, you don't have to always raise your hand first and answer every question, okay? So a little bit of advice, but you have smarts. You have resources, you have education, you have experience you bring to the table. How can you use that for God and his purposes? Because he gave it to you. That's what I'm saying here. That's what humble confidence is. Some of you have leadership skills. People follow you. You have influence. They want to follow you. You have an opportunity to mentor and impact so many people. Some of you have relational skills. Right? People like to be around you. They're attracted to you. They want to spend time with you. And you do influence them by being around them. You're really good in sort of extroverted people, situations, and relationships. Use that for God. Some of you have planning skills and organizational skills. Some of you have gone through deep pain and difficulty in your life. And maybe at times it's been hard to see how God's going to redeem that and use that, but he has uniquely put you in a position to help other people who are going through similar things. And you have a way that you can help them understand how God works and how God moves. You can share your struggles along the way, like David maybe, or like the torrents of death surrounded me, and you didn't always see how God was going to use that, but he has allowed that to take place, and he has been present with you in your pain so that you can be a part of his kingdom and bless others with that. That's a gift God has given you. And he wants to move you to help you see that it is a gift that he has given you. You can partner with him in that pain. Some of you are geeky, techie, introverted. All those words don't necessarily have to go together, but they might all go together. And just own it. Just own it and just use it. That's who I am. That's how I'm wired. That's what I'm like. And God wants to use it. We wouldn't have services here if we didn't have these people running all of the things that are happening and taking place behind the scenes. They're absolutely amazing that God has given that to you. Own it and use it. What I'm saying to you is this: no one needs to be down on themselves. Don't be down on yourself. Just use what God has given you, knowing that God loves you, that he has brought you into a family as sons and daughters of God, with brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ. You're gifted by the Holy Spirit. You're part of a family. You are valued by God. And when we can live in our identity as sons and daughters of God, knowing what he's in control, he has good plans for us, then we can wake up each day and say, okay, God, what are we doing today? God, what are we doing today? And some days you might wake up and you might not be feeling it, right? You might be in a bad mood. You might be grouchy. You might be frustrated. You might know some difficult things are going to come. And in that moment, you can say to God, the torrents of death are surrounding me and I don't feel great right now, and he will be with you and he will be your deliverer as you look to him. And some days you might wake up and you're like, I'm good to go. I'm happy with life. This is a great season. I don't even need coffee to be chipper this morning. Like, I'm ready to go. That's awesome. That's great. Still ask God the question, okay, God, what are we doing today? What do you have for me today? David did not run from being the king. He knew he was gifted and he pursued it without making it all about himself. How has God gifted you? How has he resourced you? How has he blessed you? Just be honest about it and ask him, okay, God, what are we doing today? That's humility. It's not degrading yourself, but honesty about yourself so you can get after God's purposes, which helps us to understand confidence. Confidence is not about certainty in self, but about certainty in God. Confidence is not so much about being certain in yourself and about yourself, it's about being certain in God and his plans and purposes. You know, true confidence is not so much you telling yourself, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. It's not about you looking in the mirror every morning and saying, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. They do like me, right? I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. It's not about that. Confidence comes from knowing God and his purposes. It comes from knowing that God knows you and that God has you and that God has good plans. It comes from knowing him and his purposes. Because when you are moved like David is in this Psalm 18 by the beauty of God, by the love of God, by the power of God, by the fact that God is a shelter, that God is a rock, that God is good to us, that God delivers, that God is the one who saves us, then you can have all the confidence in the world. And it's not arrogance to have confidence in God and to be very confident in what he's doing. Because in this instance, when we have a humility about ourselves and a confidence in God, our wills, your will and God's will begin to mesh together. It's not just what do I need, what do I want, what is my life going to be about? It's, okay, God, what are we doing today? This allowed David, this humble confidence allowed David to take on a giant, to sneak into an enemy camp, to wait 2 decades until he would become the king, because he had an honest assessment of himself. He stayed connected with God and God's purposes so that God's purpose became his purpose. So as David lived, could you imagine being, I don't know what he was, maybe 17, 18 years old, when no man from the army would stand against the giant, and he comes out and says, okay, so here's how this is going to go down. I'm going to knock you to the ground, I'm going to cut your head off, and all of the carcasses of the rest of your soldiers are going to be displayed for the birds to eat. Would you ever say that to somebody? I'm not suggesting you do, say that, It was a little different context in the day that David was living in. But where do you get that confidence from that is not arrogance? It's confidence in God and in his purposes, and you can have that too. Verse 30 again of Psalm 18, David, here's his confidence. As for God, his way is perfect. The Lord's word is flawless. He shields all who take refuge in him. That's where you can be confident with all parts of your life. Confidence in God, confidence in his word, confidence in his truth, confidence in his plans. In verse 46, I love how this psalm begins to escalate at the end, and you just have some exclamation points here where David just, all of this wells up inside of his heart, and he says, the Lord lives, praise be to my rock, exalted be God my Savior. You see where his confidence lies. God's children don't need to cower. We don't need to be defensive. We should not live in fear. We just need humility about ourselves and great confidence in God. Do you know true humility, like we're describing here, it actually leads to boldness and courage? Because we're excited about what God is doing. And we become excited about how God is using us. We're excited to be a part of his plans. We have a sense then with God as we're walking with him of when should I speak boldly and when do I need to pull back in this situation? God, have I gotten a little bit too much selfish ambition in my heart here? Would you forgive me for that and just change me and help me to speak into this? Help me to circle back to that person. Help me to say this. Our wills are meshing with God's will. And we can have humble confidence in that. Do you know that in David's life, arrogance would have gotten him killed and he never would have been the king? Cowering would have caused him to miss out on God's plan and he never would have been king. But humble confidence led him to victory and to the throne. He got to see God's name magnified. David does become the king, the greatest king that Israel ever saw, upholding the righteousness and the justice of God for his people, leading his people to God. As the leader went, so the people went. That was so true with David. And it was so true for as long as he remained humbly confident. So let me just finish up with this. How do you know? How do you know if you have humble confidence or not? How do you know if you have fake humility and arrogance versus humble confidence? How do you know if you have arrogant arrogance? Well, let me just tell you, we all know if you have arrogant arrogance, right? You know people that have arrogant arrogance, they just have an air about them. You're like, whoa, that person is like, woo. You just know sometimes. The harder one to see is like the false humility and arrogance. It kind of hides itself. So how might we know if we have humble confidence? The first answer to that question is no one has perfect humble confidence. David did have some ambition. What is the king going to do for the person who defeats the giant? He keeps asking the same question, right? So he does have some ambition in his side of his heart that he's got to deal with. That ambition eventually would get the better of him when he became entitled and he pursued it out of his own selfish pursuits. It messed him up. It messed up his country for a while as well, right? But when David stayed humbly dependent upon God, he just shows us This pursuit that is a lifelong pursuit. You're never completely going to be a humbly confident person in every situation and get the pinnacle of that, but we can work for it. We can progress in it. We can grow in it. But another way to assess whether or not I have humble confidence is simply this: to consider how you think as you interact with other people or as you leave a conversation with other people. When you're interacting with others and in that conversation, and maybe especially when you leave and you're thinking about that conversation, how do you think? What is the inner voice going on inside of your head? Does it tend to be like this? I wonder what they think of me. I wonder if they think I'm smart. I wonder if they think I'm funny. I wonder if they'll want to talk to me again. I wonder how I came across when I said that. I wonder if this, I wonder if that, all related to what? This is our default setting. Me. How do I look? What do they think of me? That's one way that many of us often think. It's the default. I think the humbly confident way moves us into this place where we begin to say this: I hope I'm encouraging to them. I hope that lifted them up. And even in the midst of a conversation with somebody, you might get to the place where you whisper a prayer to God and say, God, give me the words to say right now. How could I bless them? How could I help them? How could I hear them? What do they need? And when I leave the conversation, I'm praying, God, would you bless them and help them? And if I get an opportunity to talk to them again, show me how to just be an encouragement to them and point them towards you. Those are two very different inner voices going on. And the humbly confident person is the one that begins with God's help to shift towards others and God's will for them. You see, it's an orientation towards God and others versus a focus on self. What gets at C.S. Lewis's classic definition of humility, you maybe heard this before, but C.S. Lewis said this about humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's not being down on yourself. It's not degrading yourself at all. Humility is thinking of yourself less. Thinking of me less and thinking more of you and God's purposes for us. And if we could stop worrying so much about our own needs, our own desires, our own benefits, and other people's opinion of us, we'd be in a much better place to bless others and to see God's purposes in every interaction, and we would be humbly confident. You never fully get away from thoughts about yourself. We'll never fully deny selfish ambition. We are flawed humans, but we can grow. We can grow by being captured by the beauty and the glory and the goodness of our God. He is our rock. He is our shelter. He is our salvation. He is good. And you, if you have trusted in Jesus Christ, you are a daughter of God. You are a son of God. You are in his family. He loves you. He has good plans for you. Keep looking to him and his purposes, and we will grow together in humble confidence. Would you bow your heads?